like you said, there's countries where like if you're fine with the Bible, you're executed in the world. So it's like I don't know if we're just like even softened to religion, but that there's like well, I'm Christian, grittier Christians that appreciate it and live it, like live in fear day to day. It's kind of like a different mindset here. It's very comfortable, and a lot of people in the U.S. don't necessarily know how life is like in other countries because they're someone in a Western bubble.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. We grow up with an ideal of what adult life is supposed to look like. The great job, the big house, the nice car, and the perfect family. Surrounding ourselves with what is commonly referred to as being grown up. We set these expectations before us, never knowing if they're realistic. Life throws us curveballs, and we're forced to change our perceptions, adjusting to a vision of life that we didn't see coming. What we want is not always what we can have. What we're given is always what we need. The equilibrium of life will always fall back into balance. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we sit down with a gentleman's name who is extraordinarily hard for me to pronounce, and that's Roman Prokopchuk.
You want me to do it? Roman Prokopchuk.
That's good. That's really, really good.
I hit it.
And we are here to discuss the suffering of miscarriages for men. We may not know, as men, we may not know what the physical pain's like, but we certainly know the emotional pain. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Before we get started, let's give a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody, but we do trust Toyota of Hackensack. So if you're looking for a car, let them find you one. Go to toyotaofhackensack.com and they'll find you a car. So the Digital Savage Experience podcaster is in the house.
We got a pro.
Yeah, no, it's actually really nice to sit down with another podcaster because you get it.
Yeah, it's kind of a different flow, a different kind of, I guess, vibe in a way.
You know, when you get and
I mean, we had this conversation before. Sometimes like pulling answers out of people.
You know, when you have, and listen, we are grateful for all our guests. Don't get me wrong, but when you have somebody who's never done a show, it's not their fault. They got inexperience. You know when to talk, you know when not to talk, you know when to break, and things like that. So it's really nice. Thank you so much for coming all this way.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, like I said.
So, Roman, each week we take a question from our audience. This week's question comes from Salinas. It says, what do you feel no one understands about you? You could tell your whole life story to somebody, but there's something about you that you feel like, yeah, you just don't get it. What do you think?
I think meeting me in general, like in a public setting, or if it's like networking or for the first time, I think being brought up or being born in Eastern Europe and being brought up in kind of that culture, I'm more kind of reserved and stoic. So if I'm in a scenario, they're like, you know what happened? Are you okay? Like, who are you about to beat up? And I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I'm content. I'm happy.
Well, so you're from Ukraine.
Yes.
I think there's a thing about Eastern Bloc. I don't know if it's a people. I don't know what the right term is. The Eastern Bloc people. It's just they're
Bloc mentality.
They're hard people.
Yeah.
They're hard people. Like they've seen a lot of crap. They haven't had easy lives. So maybe that's got something to do with it, or maybe it's the bone structure, the skin tone. I don't know.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of founders and unicorn companies, a lot of the people are from Eastern Europe, or like first generation immigrants, or their parents were immigrants. So I feel like they have kind of like an extra grit if they did grow up in that, or obviously they heard it from their parents or grandparents. So.
You know what I love about people from the Eastern Bloc who immigrate to the United States? They are so overly grateful
to be here,
to be in America,
Yep.
More so than people who were born here. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, and most people, I think, seize opportunities more at a more rapid pace. We actually did Airbnb for like a year, and we had two people from Belarus. Were like Russia's staging.
I know them from the Olympics. I can't say I know where it is on a map.
Yeah, it's north of Ukraine and borders Russia, but literally they both found jobs. They both got cell phones. They both got rent in like 4 days. And there's people just complaining and nitpicking. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But, they came here. They're grateful, appreciative. And whatever you get, everything in life is a lesson or a blessing. So it's kind of a building block or a cornerstone for whatever you have next.
Well, there aren't too many people like from the Ukraine and from Russia that emigrated here that are homeless.
This is true.
Right?
You know what?
They're all
I never
working.
thought about that, but you're 100% correct.
Yeah.
Mike, what do you think? What's one thing that people don't understand about
You
you?
know, people tell me all the time before they meet me and get to know me that I look intense. You know, and like my kids growing up, all their friends were afraid of me. I'm 5'9", 180 pounds. You know, maybe I have an intense look about me, but I just went out and met a couple weeks ago. I met up with a guy from high school and his wife. She came up. I never met her before. She goes, "Are you always this intense?" I said, "I'm the most fun-loving." We're sitting in a bar drinking, and she's telling me I'm intense. I'm one of the most fun-loving guys you'd ever want to meet. But I
You
guess
do
it's
have
just
to
about-
break. I'm gonna give you an outsider's perspective on this. You do have to break through your shell a little bit. And when people get to know you, you're different than what you appear.
But it's really not a shell. It's it's like you said. It's kind of like stoic. You know, you just have that look about you, and I guess I have because I always have a puss on my face, whether I'm happy or sad.
It's called resting bitch face.
Exactly, it's resting Mike face. I always have that look, and I could be having the best time in the world, but I just have that look about me, and people think that I'm a miserable prick. Sometimes I am, but for the most part,
For me, I think one of the things you've seen this a little bit is like you, I present myself a certain way. But what people don't realize, and they'll throw jabs thinking that I'm a lot tougher than I am because I'm extraordinarily sensitive. Extraordinarily sensitive.
he'll cry before the episode's over.
Probably. And that's one of the things that people don't get about me. But if you make fun of me while I'm crying, I may punch you. You know, that's the duality of me. So just because you see somebody like Mike, you know, you put that, don't think that you know them from the way they look. Because that's judging a book by its cover. It's a really bad lesson.
Do you think it's cop mentality? I said it all the time. You know, as a cop, you got to put this shield around you. You know, because you don't want anybody to really get to know you until you let them get to know you.
Because it's a vulnerability.
Yeah,
And when
exactly.
people pick out your vulnerabilities, there are some people in this world who will capitalize on your vulnerabilities, and you don't want that ever. But it's also qualifying people before you get to know them. Like if I found out, you know, you look a certain way, but you probably got a real soft heart, you know, and that's
Which we'll find out today.
Yeah, we'll find out. The jury's still out on that one. Salinas, thank you so much for sending that in. Keep sending in your questions. We will try to get them on the air. So you traveled all this way from our near nation's capital, or near state's capital. State capital. The episode that's airing this week of this recording, she spent some time in Trenton, but I'm sure not the accommodations that you're in. Thank you so much for coming. Roman, I've been reading a lot about you, but I really want you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, first generation immigrant from Ukraine. Came over when I was 5 with 6 other family members. Ukraine was still under the Soviet Union. So, you know, as we spoke off air, my parents' family, you know, practiced, you know, believed in God, went to church. That's obviously against what you are in obviously a communist state like China, or it was the Soviet Union at the time.
What religion is it?
Well, I mean, I consider myself non-denominational, but it was Pentecostal. So basically Christian.
Wait, Pentecostal was, wow. So Pentecostal in the United States, I'm sure you're aware, is a highly Latin community base, especially in this area. Yeah. And, you know, they're get up and dance people.
Very charismatic.
Yeah.
I actually have went for a while to a Spanish/Ukrainian church, which was interesting. So, but yeah, it's similar. Like I said, off air, there would be KGB outside of your house. They would take privileges away. My mom was like top of her class. They took that away from her. They took different other kind of like, I guess, social things away. They would tap your, you know, phone. They would come to your house if you were like meeting at somebody's house in secret. So when immigration opened up, basically we had the opportunity. We had a distant family member that basically you had to sponsor someone to come over. Basically, it takes liability. So if anything happens financially or otherwise, that person basically says that, you know, I will, you know, be the one that steps up and takes care of it. So we came over to a 2-bedroom apartment, 6 family members, my grandparents on my mother's side, my mom, my aunt, my little brother that was 11 months at the time. So he went through a journey. So we started at Ukraine and we went through Vienna, Austria, and then Rome, Italy. That was kind of like the path to the U.S. at the time. I was supposed to end up in California, so I like often think about that West Coast East Coast dynamic.
Your skin tone will not do well in California. I hate to tell you,
No,
man.
I'm actually I was born. I look like I was from Saudi Arabia. They thought I was switched at birth. I get really dark actually. So
That's the something weird. So when your parents came here, I don't know if they're still alive or not. When they came here and they had the religious, people take religious freedom for granted. They really do. But when they got here and they were able to worship the way, because who are they hurting? Like seriously, who are you hurting? As long as you're not radicalized by religion. When they got here and they experienced firsthand the freedom of religion, what was that experience like for them?
I mean, gratitude and just thankfulness for really being here. I mean, like you said, there's countries where like if you have you're fine with the Bible, you're executed in the world. So it's like I don't know if we're just like even softened to religion, but that there's like well, I'm Christian, grittier Christians that appreciate it and live it like live in fear day to day. It's kind of like a different mindset here. It's very comfortable, and a lot of people in the U.S. don't necessarily know how life is like in other countries because they're someone in a Western bubble.
Yeah, well, Western bubble, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, there's too many people in a Western bubble.
Isn't it like imposing your ideology on someone?
You know, that's why
You know.
that's the basis of why this country was founded. Really, it's religious freedom through
Yeah.
and through. So we got to keep that moving because when, a lot of it is if they take away religion in those countries, because communism is very controlling. Is that the right word for it?
Yeah, like the state is your god in a way. You like kind of bound down, or in a way not worship, but kind of like they don't want anything between you, that connection between you and the state in a way.
Because most people's lives, especially very religious people, it's, even the military, it's God country.
Yeah.
God comes first. And I guess, and I get it when it comes to that. I mean, if you're a student of history, like Hitler would never marry Eva Braun while he was in the height of his power because he wanted to be the people's man, and he didn't want anybody getting between them and him. It was that connection type of thing. So I'm assuming it's a lot like that. It's a control thing. And I don't think it's the right way to live, but I don't have to live in Russia or Ukraine. So is it like that still in Ukraine?
No, I mean it's open to practice. There was a situation recently that kind of got twisted because there's orthodoxy is the state religion. So there's the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and because it was the Russian Orthodox Church, they had like I guess it's FSB, like KGB back in the day, agents that would like monitor and do whatever spy like people do. And I think the head patriarch of the Russian church is a billionaire, so that kind of goes against the whole
Yeah.
kind of being there for the people and not being of this world in a way.
I mean, there's a bunch of Russian Orthodox churches around. I don't want to say around the area, but you see them pop up all the time. Is that people that just emigrated here from Russia and started up their own church because they couldn't?
Churches are ultra profitable.
Yeah.
A lot of them have been around here, just like obviously like Catholic churches, a lot of like Italian, focused Catholic churches, and they have bigger kind of like I would say overlords in a way. I mean, I'm not about like the structure of religion. I'm more about the personal relationship, you get through spirituality and having a personal relationship with God, because when you throw all this earthly stuff at it and, you have to give me
Becomes
this, that, or
convoluted
the other.
and-
Yeah, I'm not about that.
So let me just sum that up for everybody. So when you go and you go and worship whatever you worship. Okay, whatever you worship. How do you feel?
Rejuvenated, kind of like that I can take on anything.
How did your parents feel when they went and worshipped their God in Ukraine or Russia at the time?
In fear of their life, of their freedom.
There you go. And that is the beauty of America. Now, when you came here, was America what you thought it was?
I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, you get kind of a view outside. Like not everything is kept from you how the U.S. is. Although the Soviet Union and the U.S. were different at the time. U.S. obviously had more privileges, even though you're talking about Russia saying they're a superpower, so on and so forth, based on their nuclear arsenal. Really, in a way, yeah. But like some things like people took us to a mall, and my mom's like, all right, cool. I'm not really impressed. Like, it's a mall, because they were like, you're coming from Ukraine, kind of like mentality. You're in the middle of nowhere. Like, we
Well,
came,
look, we have
yeah,
mailboxes here.
yeah, I came from a city that's a 750-year-old city. It's on a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So Vikings basically founded it. It's all cobblestone streets and stuff like that, architecture. So it was like a concrete mall, like cool.
Your people got Viking blood in them.
Yeah, it was a Kivi. It's technically as a Kivian Rus. So like Vikings went down all the rivers and riverways in Europe and plundered and whatever. But eventually they set up settlements, started farming, kind of toned down the aggression a little bit. So in Ukraine, they founded basically Kiev. So it's Kievan Rus. They existed. Kiev existed hundreds of years before Moscow was even a city. It was still like farmland and forest. So
You must have loved it when the Klitschko brothers were fighting.
yeah, I mean Ukraine produces a lot of great fighters. Right now, it's Usyk trying to challenge Fury, and then there's a lot of other like Lomachenko. I mean, they're known for boxing, so
That's when you see the size of these
Yeah,
gentlemen,
the Klitschko's are like 6'7".
you're like, all right, you got some Viking blood in you.
Till Valhalla.
But so you become at 6 years old. I imagine you assimilated into American culture pretty easily. It wasn't that difficult for you.
yeah, 5 into 6. So right into kindergarten. I didn't speak the language, but if you learn English before a certain age, obviously you don't retain the accent. And being amongst people that speak English for a majority of your week, Monday to Friday when you're at school, you start picking stuff up, picking up language really quickly. Although I had an accent, so first and second grade, I was in ESL, which is English Second Language, and then I just tested out of it. So it took me really 2.5 years to learn English to a point where I could take a test or have some kind of, oral resuscitation where, they were comfortable with me knowing the language.
Well, what was the language you were speaking there?
Ukrainian.
You were speaking Ukrainian, not Russian.
Yeah, I'm from like straight.
But that's not
Straight up Ukrainian.
That's not our alphabet. That's the Cyrillic
Cyrillic, yep.
Cyrillic alphabet.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you had to not only learn the language, which English is the most difficult language in the world to learn because there's just so many different rules and exceptions to rules, but you also had to learn a new alphabet. Not like somebody coming from a Latin country, which uses the Greek, or the Latin-based language. So was finding it
And
difficult?
English have so many words
It's crazy.
that they're spelt the same and mean different things.
You imagine you meet somebody from Ukraine and say, WTF.
Yeah.
OMG. They'll be like, what the fuck are you talking
Yeah,
about?
what the fuck, they'd say.
Yeah, what the fuck, right. Exactly. It's like a Who's on First. Yeah, if you never watch Who's on First, that's the first thing I'd teach you immigrating into this country about English. But, what were you looked at this? Were you assimilated into the group or were you picked on because you were from another country?
I mean, I learned, like you said, I learned both languages at the same time, kind of. So I learned both alphabets. So it's just like, I mean, right now when I speak to my mom, it's like half English, half Ukrainian, like a hybrid in a way.
Ukrainish?
Yeah.
Well, we call it Spanglish.
Spanglish.
Yeah, but it was like people in a way took advantage because they're like, go say this, like raise your hand and go call the teacher a bitch in kindergarten. And I would do it and I have no knowledge of what I'm saying. And then my mom comes to pick me up as soon as the girl translated what I said. She didn't even finish translating upside my head and like grabbed my ear and dragged me home.
Think about how powerful a weapon that could have been as you learned English. You could just go around, bitch. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't speak the language. Say something in Ukrainian. You're like, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. So there are some times when you can use that stuff to your advantage. But normal high school, normal childhood, you benefited from this country.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I haven't spoken to my dad since 2008. So there was domestic abuse when I was growing up. When he was.
Oh, they didn't come over with you.
No, they did.
They did.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
There was 6
right.
of us. My parents, my like I said, my grandparents, my aunt, my mom's sister, and my brother. So it was basically when we were growing up when I was young. I carried over because he did it in Ukraine, and there's a different mantra. I don't know how it is now. Before, like a woman couldn't call the police for domestic violence. They would just kind of like, okay, like deal with it. Yeah. Like it wasn't like a crime. It was just one of those things like, oh, this guy is keeping his wife or woman in line or whatever. So here, even in Ukraine, when my mom was pregnant with my brother, she got thrown down the stairs, so my brother was supposed to be stillborn. Luckily, that didn't happen, but he was abusive physically to my grandparents, my aunt, everybody like in between. And right now, I consider myself out of shape. But like when I started turning 18, I turned 18. I would be in the gym 7 days a week. I got to a point where people were asking me if I went to Rutgers, like on the football team, because I carried so much muscle and was consuming so many calories. But subconsciously, I was thinking like if that situation ever caught up to me again, I wouldn't be like this little scared kid or whatever, not being able to do anything. I would be able to actually like kind of stand up and defend my mom, which theoretically happened in 2007, 2008. And, I kicked them out of the house. And I was like, you were able to do this when I'm little, like hit her now or hit me and see what happens. And it was just like a lot of like rage and pent up aggression coming out.
Yeah, it's 13 years of rage.
Yeah.
Now, do you think your father experienced that growing up and it was a normal thing to him?
He definitely did, but I think it's mindset too. So you can't be one of those things like, everybody did it. So that's my excuse. It's like kind of growing up. Like I often say, like two siblings, one turned out like their parents, maybe, drugs or alcohol or abusive, and one is a successful, person, upstanding person, philanthropic person. What's that thing that, made them tick? Like you have that ability. It's not easy to change that, but you have the opportunity to do it.